Hi everyone, it's Libby here and I manage channelingmercredan.com and I'm also Francis's daughter-in-law. And Francis is the very talented trance medium who channels Mercredan. And this video is a full-length clip from a free webinar that we ran at the end of last year about the higher truth on global events. And whilst a lot of the events we spoke with Mercredan about were relevant at that time, the answers are very much relevant still to this day. So in this clip, we talk about Iran and oppression through ideology. We talk about the corruption that surrounded FIFA World Cup. We spoke about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. We talked about volcanic activity in China. There's a bit about Great Britain and Joe Biden's potential for a second term. And there was lots of talk around ideology and separation and what we need to do to overcome, or what we could do to overcome the fear that some of these world, or a lot of these world events create. So if you're interested in being notified of future webinars like this with Mercredan or any special offers for private channeling sessions, then please click the link in the description and subscribe to our database. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, wherever you are. Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Everything comes with consequence. And in truth, the consequence is the result of what went beforehand. Whatever action one takes comes with its appropriate consequence. One does not then get a consequence that is randomly appropriated without the previous context. So one creates reality individually and en masse. The results of the total provide the consequences, the context, and the history as it unfolds. Enough for us to begin a conversation.
Thank you, Mercredan. Thank you again for being here with us today. Today, I'd like to start by talking about Iran. And for those who are not aware, Iran has experienced a dictatorship and oppression and discrimination against women, religious and ethnic minorities. And in September, a 22-year-old woman was arrested by the morality police for not fully covering her hair and then died incidentally in custody within 2 days later. The country has then erupted in protests and rallies, leading to over 100 protesters allegedly being killed, thousands of arrests, and it has been reported that they've since shut down the internet and banned journalism. This week, they've started to carry out public executions to political prisoners, and obviously people are very concerned. The question that they would like to know today is, what is the future Iran is facing and as the result of this revolution?
Once again, isn't it appropriate that the larger whole picks on something outside of self to blame? But everything is within the global structure. Everything comes from the, shall we say, the global mind. And this, shall we say, challenge has been brewing for a long time, isn't it? Everywhere, if one truly wants to look for it. Even in this personal country of my dear friend, isn't it a challenge? Isn't there, shall we say, an ideological war taking place. And where in the world is that not the case? An ideological war of morality is taking place. And as such, individual states, shall we say, arise to demonstrate for the whole. As if you can isolate yourself from, shall we say, the dictates of separation. For hundreds of years there have been wars perpetrated on others by ideological extremists. Isn't that the case? You see it in all of the places and all of the wars. The wars are the fighting ground of ideological extremists. And shall we say, at the end of the epoch, all of these extremes have to meet their ultimate consequence. All of it has to be resolved inside of the mass consciousness. Then individuals who have an ideological extremism. I want to say everyone needs to look inside for this. What is seen is obvious to them, which is who do you blame for the problems that you see all around you? Is it the other person? Is it the person with the black skin or the yellow skin or the white skin or the Christian or the Muslim or the Buddhist or whatever? Isn't it always someone else's fault? And yet, shall we say this? Everyone understands, because it is taking everyone by storm, that the planet is heating up. What does that mean in your ordinary vernacular? Heating up says there is energy rising. There are challenges coming about. And the challenges that come about are not random, shall we say, but they are brought about by the structures of society that isolate and separate and cannot see the connection. I want to say this. The mind separates. It is its function to analyze and to discriminate. And the heart connects because it has empathy for others. It begins to recognize that therefore the divine intervention, I could be in that position myself. Such then, it is important for the mind and the heart to be in balance. You understand? One has to recognize that what is from the heart and what is from the mind, and not to confuse them. So it is important in the, shall we say, in the tradition of physical reality, that is space and time, that there has to be distance, so that one can truly understand what is occurring. And if you look back over history, you can look into your own, shall we say, historical past and see where there has been misjustice. How is that possible? Because one has separated between time zones, shall we say, and each person individually looks back at their history, their personal things they have done, and can learn from them, can see what was useful, what was beneficial, and what was destructive. And so it is that humankind at this turning point of the epoch has to complete the final, shall we say, balancing act. And it was never promised to be, shall we say, an easy task. Does that shine some light on what is occurring, not just in this particular ideological upset, but all over in every domain?
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you. However, if you had loved ones, or if you were in Iran and you were experiencing the front line of what's happening in Iran, what would your advice be? How would you, explain to somebody what's happening and how you can deal with it?
This is a very difficult subject, you understand, because in the main, humanity as individuals do not understand that, shall we say, it is not as real as it seems. One has to recognize then that, shall we say, the physical incarnation is but a blip on one's total evolutionary path. And for some people it is, shall we say, necessary to experience the heroic journey. It is something that they would love, shall we say, to complete, because the past has not either offered that, or it has, and it was the path of cowardice was taken instead. Do you understand? So from that point of view, it is not truly as it seems. It is not so that you can take, shall we say, a back seat and see that it is something other than what it is. That is not to say that from, shall we say, from the inner core, one should not, shall we say, demonstrate against it. Just as it is that one should not, shall we say, demonstrate against anything that is unjust. So where does one start? Does one start by, shall we say, demonstrating the injustice over there, rather than the injustice right in your own path? And the injustices that have been taken on historically, does one put the injustice of the past into context? Or does one want to wipe the injustice that has been beneficial for one's own family and friends and so on, and put one's attention in the opposite direction? Do you follow what I mean? And for someone in that circumstance, look at the history of where this arose. And what was it brought about? Where did it start from? Where extremists took over from other extremists? And who was, shall we say, the puppet for the extremists of the past? Do you understand? It is a great demonstration of the play of history. Then, for every individual, one creates one's own reality. One might choose the path of heroism because one truly has no fear of dying, of surrendering to what might be called one's fate, but in a conscious fashion that one leaves, shall we say, behind. Always there is, for every one that is taken down, more than two begin to arise from it, and so on. Change eventually comes about. But it cannot come about in one place without global change. Do you understand? So one meets all of this, and one points out that the extremists of putting down, shall we say, the journalists, but the journalists are not reporting what is truly happening. They are reporting to their masters who have other agendas. Do you understand? It is all about who rules, as it were, while the planet goes through its crisis of heat, the heated crisis that will continue until war comes to an end. Do you understand? In your own country, where is it supporting war? Do you understand? What is it telling its population that is truly the facts? Or is it siding with one side for political and economic gains? For, do you understand what I mean? You cannot separate any of it from its ideological basis. That is war winning and, shall we say, overcoming others. Do you follow what I mean? So for those, it is a challenge, and every great soul arises up to the challenge. And that is why the great master took that place in the storylines, to rise up for truth and for honesty. Then, as all things, justice must prevail, not the laws of the land, but the divine laws that bring everyone together. Does this make sense?
It does. Thank you. My next question is, the new Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak, is said to be an oligarch who is known to represent others like him. Why are we seeing this happen, and what should the British people expect from such a leader?
Once again, ideology. You understand, everyone in the world wants more of it. Give me more. I want to be on the winning side. I don't want to play the game. I want to be the winning side. You understand? Look at your sports. It is as bad as it was in the ancient times. You understand? This team against that team, and who cares about the rules of the game, because there is more money to be made on the winning side. You understand what I mean? So what will you do? Elevate those from the winning team as if they will help you to ascend. But of course, they are not interested in the players at all. They are interested in the results. You understand? And it doesn't matter which leader you put in, because the game is over. Do you understand? The great period of the epoch is coming to a close, because all of the resources have arrived, shall we say, at the winner of the game. But when the winner of the game is alone, those that are also playing will rise up, and it will be of no consequence. You have won it all, but for no purpose. The ideology will die with it. Do you understand what I mean? So generations coming to a close that have collected all of the wealth, and suddenly it is that one generates two sides of a great divide. And this in history has played itself out over and over and over again. Each time it is a new element, if you like. And you have in modern times chosen modern warfare. You've had two played out world wars, and you are in the midst of the third. Everyone thinks that it has not started, but it has been going on for a very long time. It is the war of ideology, the war to convince you that this path or that path. Does this make some sort of sense? So what can anyone in the physical realm do, shall we say, is to reduce their involvement in the game. That is, making their own resources, their own, shall we say, friendships and so on, communities and so forth. Because in the end, when the heat goes out of the system, as it ultimately will, shall we say, it is those that are with you in your communities that will come together for the benefit of everyone. They will recognize everyone has something to offer. And even those that you looked down on previously will eventually rise up and have the most to offer. It is the way of the learning in the physical dimension. Nothing wrong with it. Do you understand? Nothing wrong with it. But the new wisdom that recognizes that there is a divinity that floods and flows through, that is not causing the coming together of bands, one against the other. Does this follow? So it is, shall we say, the challenging times of disruption. So the new organization, I don't want to say it is order, but the new organization of unity through diversity, through unity through diversity. You understand, it is endlessly playing out the nature of reality. It is hard, I want to say, it is hard when we say you create your own reality, because then you have to wake up. You have to acknowledge something that seems unlikely. But what is truly unlikely is that one will learn this by intellectual reasoning. It will not, because the mind separates. One can only learn it through the nature of the heart and the connections one makes.
Thank you. My next question is, Elon Musk acquired Twitter for $44 billion this year. Can you talk to us about what's happening here and what we should see as a result from this acquisition?
Isn't it insane? What sort of madness is make something worth so much money? And I will tell you what it is. He has not purchased the platform, he has purchased the people. He is purchased and saying, what I say matters. You understand, I can manipulate all of it so it aligns to what I want to present. because he is not a stupid man. He is very intelligent. In fact, he understood more than anyone that you can spend this sort of money and very quickly gain it back from the advantage you have of, shall we say, conquering people's minds. You understand World War III. That is, who controls your mind? Who controls what you think? And so it constantly builds and builds on some ideological foundation that is nothing more than that. Where is the critical thinking that is capable of identifying truth from something else? If you are fed endless lies, do you understand what I mean? Politics has lied. All over the world, the ideology of that has not served those who constantly put these people in power. They are not voting for the people at all. They are voting for an ideology that has sold them something that is not real. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it is important that one begins at least to find one's connection to the divine order and to, shall we say, distance oneself from that which is owned by somebody else. Does this make sense? The great master said, give to Caesar what belongs to that person, but give to the divine your heart. You understand, your heart and your actions belong to that which gives you life. Then it is important how you deliver this. How do you stand in the world? How do you distance yourself? And how do you see what the ideology will bring to the benefit of everyone? This is such a difficult topic because it encompasses everyone and all of the thoughts and has to do that everyone has to consider themselves and their personal ideology. How did they arrive at it? How did they buy into this rather than find what is important to themselves and what universe will they want to create? You understand, the consequences will be direct. So if you are putting your attention and your energy towards something and the consequences are not to your approval, distance yourself from it. Does this make some sort of sense?
It does.
I want to say this because, as we have pointed out, the the end, shall we say, of the old order is in sight. This year, as you have experienced it, was difficult, but wait for the next one. As you begin to see more and more of the old breaking into separate partitions, more and more disorder and disorganization and disunity, and all of it in the beneficial nature of the divine acting to bring balance and order, organization into place. Does this make some... I want to say this. It is so important to love yourself, to love what you stand for, to love that it is for the benefit of everyone, even those that you find judgment with. Because judgment comes from separation. And most people, shall we say, are not born into a certain way. They are nurtured into it by conditions that have been applied. Those conditions are the consequence of social norms. That is, everyone is responsible for the child. In the old systems, shall we say, the child was not of the parent, the child was of the village. Everyone took responsibility. Do you understand what that means? Nobody brought blame, but the councils looked for how to bring out the best for the child. And as a result, there is cohesion. Important to recognize that in your modern world, it is school that brings cohesion, but it has no power of enforcement. It has no power because the parents are indifferent. Do you understand what I mean? Enough on that topic.
Yeah, thank you. Next question is, you previously said once before that New Zealand has so many potentials in terms of volcanic activity, but that it is anchored in the active volcanic activity in the Hawaiian Islands. And New Zealand and Hawaii, the two foremost Polynesian cultures, light the way. One greets the new day first, one completes it, and holds the path open for the rest to explore until it is grounded functionally in the heat of the moment. What can you tell us now that we've got a lot more recent volcanic activity in Hawaii and that seems to be ramping up?
I have said in the past, there is, shall we say, an anchored trinity between the sacred islands, that is the great volcanic volcanoes in the Hawaii, the great volcanoes in what is the Indochina, that is such places, Bali and the Indonesian archipelago, and your own home turf, as it were. And as such, this trinity of activity anchors one part of the planet, so that it can hold face while change occurs. If humanity does not, shall we say, return to balance, the planet and the planetary guardian can release such energies in such a fashion that most of life will cease to exist. Humans think they can protect the ongoing system, but that is because there is a denial that the disruption and mess that you are in is your own creation. Do you understand? So beyond that, as I have pointed out, the planetary guardian protects life on Earth in all of its diversity. So every time the planet loses a species, it loses more of its protection. Do you understand? It is losing control of its pathways. So when this occurs, it, shall we say, makes warning signals. And it has done this in three specific locations. Do you understand? First, you had one volcanic eruption that hurt humanity directly in your own country. Then there was a second one occurring in the Indochina realm that disrupted and brought more destruction. And now it is the turn of the great one that is, shall we say, providing a spectacle. But it is also affecting far more than it seems on the surface. These are warning signals. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. It does.
So it is, I want to say this, so it is both an ideological challenge that is, shall we say, the greatest Islamic country in the world and the greatest so-called Christian culture. They are drawing, shall we say, difficulties, drawing tension. And in your own country, an attempt to balance the odds, shall we say, to recognize that both are welcome, that there should not be any, shall we say, attempt to dispel one or the other.
Thank you. Probably something along the same veins as my next question, in terms of the ideology that you're speaking of a lot today. I wanted to just briefly talk to you about the FIFA World Cup and how thousands of desperate and vulnerable migrant workers have reportedly died in Qatar whilst building the latest World Cup. And now FIFA and the country Qatar and those involved are profiting over it. Can you give us any insight on FIFA, the corruption that surrounds it?
Isn't this the most important focus of all? You understand, look at it. This is not a country. This is a focal point in a proposition that reduces everyone into a number. And the question is, who is fighting for their lives? You understand? What is up in the odds here? Shall we say, look at it. The great nations of the old world are not performing. And who is performing? The nations of the new world, the nations that represent the Africans of the world, and the nation that has, shall we say, the most of the people who have flooded into the old world to get some of what was taken from them. You understand? The wealth of the great nations was taken by the old world, and now it is being challenged for its certainty. You understand? So what happens is the old world, that is the wealth that built this great stadium, this great Colosseum, does not care for the slaves that constructed it at all. They are of no consequence, as were the slaves that built the Colosseum in Roman times. Do you understand? So here is everyone on the stage watching the great sport. And it is not going as it should. As I have pointed out, so much of the old is destroying itself by its own actions. Does this make sense? So the organization cannot survive this. And a new order, a new organization with a different attitude into the sporting arena will arise. Does this make sense?
It does. And we've talked a lot today about the disorder and disorganization, the disunity, and the breaking down that can no longer last, and the coming of the epoch and the new organization. And we're going to go into this more our next webinar when we talk about 2023 and what's in store for our future. But I wondered if you could give us a brief understanding about when, like a time, like human timeline, time frame, when we would see things switch from the great break. I know things are getting worse. They're going to break down even more. But
I
when
want
should we
to
see
say
a switch?
this. Switching is instant. One breaks down slowly. You understand? And then at the very end, it is over. The switch comes, shall we say, when the last weapon of war is put to rest. If that requires humans to destroy themselves, then that in the, shall we say, the physical world, that is what will happen. Do you understand? Some will survive. Those that survive will be the final end, shall we say, of the struggle for domination. So, shall we say, human intelligence is also in the balance, as it were. What will the majority stand up for? You talk about your Iran. What will they stand up for? What will they put on the line in an ideological war? Everyone thinks it is someone else's war, but it is not. It is human war for, shall we say, common unity. That is an order that truly values the life that is given to every individual. So when you look at another individual, you look at them and you say, that is a person with divine life. It is my duty, my value to bring from that person what they have to offer, to value the divine's gift of life in another. You understand? Then everything changes. There is no ideology that values life in such a fashion. Not has this ever been before that values life above all, that values the divine that has given life and allowed everyone to partake of it. This is the great banquet that was talked about.
Thank you. A lot of these topics and a lot more news items are very much create a lot of fear in people. So I think the next question is very pertinent. Do you have any techniques that you can suggest on how to reverse fear once it overwhelms you?
Always we talk of meditation and breathing and so forth and so on. But one has to leave behind the mind. If one truly begins to live with value, that which one fears most is that which you have disabled most. People are fearful of others that they believe are the problem. And I am saying, if you realize they are not the problem, it is the ideology that one holds dear that is the problem. That the blame one is putting on others is the problem. Then, shall we say, learn to love. First of all, to love oneself. To realize there is nothing to fear other than that which I attract to myself by my polarization. We have talked about the great laws. So when one polarizes and puts something over there with a charge on it, one wants to push it away, then it is attracted ever strongly to you. So you bring to you that which you most reject. You understand then, if you learn to love others and to realize they are living through the challenges they created in longer terms. Do you understand? There are balances that have to be brought to bear. And each person has to find themselves and their personal divinity. So you understand, if you cannot bring yourself to forgive, then you will have completed the process of building fear. Does this make some sort of sense? So when you acknowledge your personal fears, when you acknowledge this is fears that I am creating and projecting onto somebody else, then if I acknowledge and look at my own self, what is it that I am in control of? Do you understand? If I cease to divide, if I cease to project, I will find my own personal heroism. That is my courage. And courage comes from the heart. It is when one puts oneself aside for a greater purpose. I want to say this because in the process of fear, one constantly regenerates fears over and over. If you think that you can do something to overcome the fear while you hold on to it, you will not succeed. First of all, you have to find your heart, the courage within it, not to build fear into the world, because whatever fear is brought in will turn into anger and destruction somewhere else. You are not so individual as you think. Does this make some sort of sense?
Very much so. Thank you. Wonderful. Is there a high probability that Joe Biden will remain the US president for a second term?
That question is so often asked. I want to say, whatever occurs will not be of any benefit to anyone. When there is, shall we say, a pit of vipers, does it matter which one bites which one else? Sometimes it looks like the worst, and yet the worst sometimes is the best in the end, because someone who can destroy what is corrupt and destructive quickly is possibly the best one could ask for. Does this make some sort of sense?
Yeah, so you're basically saying there's not a great choice out of any of the candidates, and the one that can get us on a path faster to destruction perhaps would be the best choice in that situation.
I do not want to sound too negative, as if it is a predetermined event that destruction has to occur. But human nature has not offered very many alternatives. Do you understand what I mean? Even those with the best intentions are still in the hands of those with the strongest ideology. So where do you go from there? How do you choose representatives that are from a higher perspective? Do you understand? Humankind has not chosen wisely for very many hundreds, even thousands of years. So I want to say, why start now? Do you understand what I mean? There will come a time when the world has to come, shall we say, to a great table of alternatives. And it is only when some great being can stand and offer unification that any justice can come to bear. So shall we say, in the end, it is in the hands of the planetary guardian. And whichever leader can come out of such thinking.
Thank you. I think our last question for today: will China allow their people to enjoy more freedoms in the months ahead? Will their dictator still go after Taiwan?
Once again, isn't this the story of ideology? Isn't this the story of representation? Isn't this the story of the news cycle? Isn't this the story of a certain group that wants everyone to believe certain issues, certain ways, and so on? And to a certain degree there is truth in it. And yet, in the way it is presented, it continues to support that ideology. You understand, when there is a challenge to one ideology, the other responds in like. Nobody wants to fight for their existence. Do you understand what I mean? And so when you are in the middle of a tug of war between two great entities, two, shall we call them, two of the world's bullies, what can anyone do in the playground but try to find who to side with? Do you understand what I mean? Who will you unside with? And shall we say the balance of power is changing? The old great bully is growing older, and the new bully is coming to the fore. Isn't it likely that one will choose different alignments in such a fashion? How can anything change until the bullies themselves decide to come to agreement? Do you understand what I mean? So everyone has experienced this, whether it is in the workplace, in the school ground, and so on. Look at it. Isn't one of your biggest challenges in your own country about bullying? And look at how the latest technology makes it more and more possible. And who is managing that? Nobody, of course. Nobody is making any moves really at all. There is so much wishing for it to go away. But it cannot go away when the world stage is filled with it. Do you understand? When the family is filled with it, when the society is filled with it. Do you think the young do not see what is really happening? And they understand. One has to, shall we say, become stronger. One has to find one's position in the pecking order of bullies. unless there is such a change, how can anyone predict a better future? Do you understand what I mean? Everyone is looking for some divine intervention to make it better without the sort of divine intervention that is occurring. Do you understand what? And shall we say, when one taps into the divine nature of oneself, one taps in and releases oneself from the game, as it were, one begins to realize that I create my own reality in line with my thoughts, my actions. And my actions and my thoughts are dictated by who I listen to. Then listen to those who want to build unity, who believe in love above all.
Thank you. I think that's enough from us today. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Mercredan?
Such a lot to digest. And I want to say, look at it. We have spoken in direct terms. Not everyone will be happy with it. Do you understand? One, however, has truly to recognize truth always proves itself in the longer term. Enough for today. Then once again, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the work as you integrate your own understanding into your consciousness and the actions that you take as a result. Then my work is done. If all it does is to have you re-evaluate yourself. Thank you and good day.